Good morning. Today I want to talk about China's likely cyber war campaign against India and what it will mean for us. Now, the cyber war will be fought in the cyberspace. Cyberspace is the virtual battlefield between the computers and the internet, and everything that connects the two is the cyberspace. That is where the cyber war will be fought. Now, my start point of the talk is a story that appeared in the New York Times in February this year. The story, quoting a prominent American firm which monitors the use of internet by state actors, drew a connection between Ladakh, where the PLA and the Indian military, they are in a standoff, and a major power outage that happened in Mumbai in October 2020. The story was that a message was being given by the Chinese by doing major cyber attacks in Mumbai, that if you do not accept our terms in Ladakh, this is something what we can do thousands of kilometers away. Then the story also mentioned about something like a dozen nodes, which is quite a bit, a dozen nodes in the power generation in Maharashtra and the transmission infrastructure which were affected by the Chinese malware. And because they did not have access to the Chinese malware, they could not examine the software codes. This is what the story was. What was the reaction of India? As far as the state government was concerned, Maharashtra government, they acknowledged that yes, cyber attacks did happen in October 2020 when the trains had shut down, the stock market closed, the power was not available to people, the hospitals had to switch over to the emergency generators. But as far as the government of India was concerned, the power ministry, they denied the whole thing. They said it never happened and the matter was over. Now recently we had Chief of the Defence Staff, General Bipin Rawat, talking in a webinar, of course drawing from the New York Times story, he made 4 points about cyber, Chinese cyber. His first point was, he said that China today is capable of launching cyber attacks. Now this was breaking news. The entire national media carried this, that China is capable of launching cyber attacks. I want to tell the general, China was capable of doing this in 2003, 18 years back. They were capable of offensive cyber attacks. The second point General Rawat made was that the biggest gap between India and China, it is in the cyber domain. Wrong. There are 10 areas, cyber is just one of them, where there are huge operational gaps between India and China, a subject for another video. The third point he made was that we are seeking Western nations' help in the area, basically implying that we will try and identify the software codes with help of some other nation. And any country will not give you anything more than defensive cyber capabilities, which could be passive, which could be active. There is no question of anybody giving us offensive cyber attack capabilities, something which countries speak in a very hush-hush tone. The only exception that I can think of is the PLA and the Pakistan military, because they have a common mission. So, in my understanding, certainly the PLA would have shared certain offensive counter-attack capabilities with the Pakistani side. The fourth point that General Rawat made was that we are trying to bring the effect of the cyber attacks, the downtime we are trying to reduce by creating alternate means and firewalls. This will not work, and I will explain why. Now, let me go back to what I said, that the Chinese had acquired the offensive capabilities in 2003. This was the year when the PLA publicly said that they were looking at 6 capabilities in cyber, because the Chinese were aware, very conscious of the fact that defensive capability in cyber are meaningless. You only need attack, you need the offensive capabilities. So, the 10 capabilities they were talking about, and they said publicly, was how to plant the information mines, to do information reconnaissance, change network data, release information and logic bombs, dump information garbage, disseminate propaganda, apply information deception, release clone information, organize information defense, and establish spy stations. These 10 capabilities now under various names they are being talked about. For example, uh, people talk about the advanced persistent attacks, which is basically a capability of the malware to hit a computer in the depths, very deep inside. Then people talk about the distributed denial of service, which basically means you flood a computer with so many emails that it blacks out. So this is the capability that the PLA had acquired, China had acquired by 2008. Then in 2009 and 2010, a major milestone was crossed insofar as cyber was concerned, the cyber domain was concerned. And this was done by the Americans and the Israelis when they used the Stuxnet worm, malware worm, against the Iranian nuclear plant, where they could damage the centrifuges for the enrichment. They did that and they brought the entire Iranian nuclear program back by a couple of years. Everybody is aware of the Stuxnet. I will not go in the details of this. I only want to talk about 4 big lessons that came out of this attack. The first thing that came out is that this was the first cyber weapon the world had seen, Stuxnet. And it had the capability to go beyond the cyberspace, beyond the virtual space, into the physical world and damage the centrifuges in the physical world. It could do that. This was a big step as far as cyber was concerned, cyber offense was concerned. Second thing was, this Stuxnet proved that a determined enemy will compromise air gaps and firewalls. It is not possible against China, and China certainly is a cyber power today. So, number 3, that the targeted attacks, when you do a targeted weapon attack, they are in a different league altogether. They are done by the state actors. They are done by the state actors because the capabilities that they are looking for, you need nanotechnology, you need high-end computers, and you don't need hackers. You actually need cyber warriors, the guys who are very good at writing complex cyber algorithms and then of course testing it for bugs regularly. So this capability China has. So because China had all these capabilities, after this Stuxnet event, the Americans, they got into the regular cyber talks with the Chinese. These talks started sometimes in 2010 itself and they still continue. And the key thing in these years, 11 years, that the Americans have been asking the Chinese is that let's declare cyberspace as a domain of war, which basically means that if we accept that this is a domain of war, then we can talk about management, we can talk about arms control in this domain, something that the Chinese side is not accepting at all, because they say that the cyberspace should not be militarized. It's security, and the security we can do collectively. They have taken an entirely different position. Why I'm saying this is to make the point that the Americans have been very worried about the Chinese cyber capabilities, which obviously are substantive. Substantive that from Stuxnet to today, 11 years have gone by. In these 11 years now, major cyber powers, including China, they are talking about artificial intelligence in the cyber domain. They are talking about human out of the loop, artificial intelligence being available for the good cyber agents, which will fight with the malware or the bad cyber agents in the cyberspace. So this is what they are talking about. And experts are also talking about that perhaps, which is of course into the future, but this is the roadmap that they have drawn, that once quantum computing comes, today the situation as far as the cyber viruses are concerned, you see, first of all, there are 3 types. You have a cyber virus, you have a cyber worm, and you have the Trojans. Now, let me make a distinction in the three. Now, as far as the cyber virus is concerned, all three are viruses, but the cyber virus, the first one I said, it needs human intervention. It gets attached to a file. When the human intervention happens, it gets into the system. It can steal things, deny information, pick up information. So, something which is done to basically get the intellectual property to get the stuff from inside. Then you have what is called the worms. Now, the worms don't need any human intervention. They only need the vulnerabilities. And once they hit the vulnerability, they just spread in the entire network, doing of course the task also that they have been given. And the third is the Trojan, which comes from the fable of the Trojan horse. Basically, they are very innocuous looking and they don't look like a malware. But once the humans mistakenly or not knowingly they click, they get them into the computer, then they get in the computer, they can steal information. Of these three, the Trojan cannot self-replicate, but the viruses and the worm, they have a capability. Once they get in the system, they spread in the system and they keep self-replicating. Now, what they cannot do today is mutate like a biological virus. They can only self-replicate. Experts believe that once the quantum computing comes in, then probably we will be looking at an entirely different level of cyber weapons, which not only will be able to replicate and mutate, but of course this is right now not in the realm of reality. But this is just to give an idea what we are talking about. The fourth thing, as far as stuckness, the lesson that came out was that if the major powers had developed such humongous cyber offensive capabilities, they needed to be dovetailed into a cyber war campaign. And that is what the major powers have been doing. Now, what is a cyber war campaign and what is it that the Chinese could be doing? Now, a cyber war campaign has three elements. It has access, I will explain this later. It has vulnerability and it has the battle damage assessment. These three things are there, and based on these three things, then the country decides the payloads, the size, design and capability of the malware which has to be inserted to accomplish the task. I would want to believe, as far as the Chinese are concerned, their cyber war campaign would operate at two levels. One is at the strategic level, which is to disrupt and destroy the civilian infrastructure India's, and this will be controlled, it will be planned, executed and monitored at the highest level, which is the Joint Staff Department and the Strategic Support Command, which both report directly to the highest body, which is the Central Military Commission. And then there will be a lower level which will be looking at how to degrade the military capabilities of India, that is at the operational level, which will be monitored and executed, perhaps planned by the JSD, Joint Staff Department, but monitored and executed by the Western Theatre Command. Now, let me start with the battle damage assessment. This is a term which is very familiar. It is familiar in warfare, but here in cyber, there is a direct link between cyber war planning and battle damage assessment, which of course is there in all the military operations, because after all, the battle damage assessment provides the feedback of the last operation to plan the next bigger one. It's a very normal thing. How it differs here in cyber is that unlike a military operation, you do a battle damage assessment and then you go in the next operation. Here, the campaign can be very slow. It can be years, it can be months, because you are looking at something entirely different in the battle damage assessment. So, four things are being looked at in this. The first is how to do precise targeting of strategic targets. You see, precise targeting is difficult, but at the same time, the requirement always will be how do we do minimal penetration and get maximum bang. So therefore, when the New York Times story broke out that a message was being given by the Chinese side to the Indian side, of course a message was being given, but more than that, what the Chinese must have been doing is, by the cyber attacks in Mumbai, they were doing the battle damage assessment. They were getting to understand how difficult certain strategic targets are and what sort of payloads and capabilities we will need against them. So, this is one thing that the battle damage assessment does. The other thing it does is it gets the government reaction. Now, you see, government reaction cuts both ways. Insofar as the Modi government is concerned, the reaction was to deny it, that they never happened in Mumbai. I mean, like they denied the other one also in Chennai in our power plant, they happened there. So, when you deny something, then the message going to the Chinese is you do not want to stand up or get involved in a cyber war or an offensive war with the Chinese. And where it cuts both ways is that the message to the stakeholders back home is, who are aware that yes, this was a cyber attack. Why is it that the government is not taking a scientific approach? Why is it that they are taking a political approach and they are confused? If they do not, if the government does not acknowledge anything, there is no remedial measures that they need to take about it. So, that is the second thing. The third thing what a battle damage assessment does is that it looks at the detection capabilities of India. Now, here in certain areas we have computer emergency teams which have done reasonably well. So, our detection capabilities are not so bad. The next fourth thing is the reaction time to take the appropriate action. Now, this reaction time is important because if the country is denying they never happened, which basically means you are actually saying that we do not have any offensive capabilities, and that squares up when I will come to the vulnerabilities, that our vulnerabilities are so huge, we have not bothered to cover them because we are still stuck into the defensive mode. So, we are not gone beyond that. So, the adversary knows, the enemy knows that there will be no reaction from the Indian side. They simply do not have that capability. And the last thing I must say is they also monitor the expert opinions. Now, in India, here is something that I need to talk about. He is Dr. Gulshan Rai, who was the first National Cyber Security Coordinator, reporting directly to the National Security Advisor. Now, we have the second one, who is a 3-star general of the army. Now, he writes, and he wrote this in June 2020 when the standoff was going on, and we've already had so many cyber attacks, perhaps attributed to the Chinese side. I mean, they came from other countries also, but many came from China. He writes that let us not overestimate Chinese capability and underestimate ours. Excuse me, I have just explained what are the capabilities of the Chinese. If the Americans are in talks with them for 11 years, what exactly do you want to know? And your own capabilities are very well known. I mean, we have today, in 2018, we created this Defense Cyber Agency. This small, which has now of course come under the CDS directly once General Rawat became the CDS, this whole defense cyber agency has come under him. This is basically doing a defensive task. I am told that the NTRO and RAW has a bit of offensive capabilities, but they are so insignificant that they are not even worth mentioning also. So, when you have experts, you have a government which denies they ever happened, then you have an expert like Gulshan Rai who actually exaggerates own capabilities and runs down the enemy capabilities. All this goes in the battle damage assessment of the Chinese. Then there was another view which came out, which was for a cyber command. Now, why is a cyber command required? A cyber command is required, it is required today. And why it is required is that there is nothing called defensive capabilities, you need offensive capabilities. It is about attack in cyber. And if you need offensive capabilities, only a cyber command can do that. Not only it will create your offensive capabilities, something no country will give you, your own people, and we have a lot of talented people in our country who can write complex algorithms. They have to be provided the wherewithal. Not only that, create the offensive capabilities, cyber capabilities, it will go and step further in teaching how to manage the cyberspace, how to do the attrition, the maneuver and attrition together in that cyberspace. This is what will be taught. And who gave that suggestion of cyber command? It came from the Congress leader Rahul Gandhi. Now that has been completely dismissed. So this is where we stand today. Now this is insofar as the battle damage assessment is concerned. Now let me talk about the vulnerabilities. Now you see, first of all, we have huge vulnerabilities. There are vulnerabilities on the civil side, and the vulnerability comes from various ways. It comes in terms of hardware. Hardware is basically your computers, your electronics, because we have picked up all these things from all over. We never really encouraged or did the hand holding of our SMEs, the people who have the talent in this country. We never did that, and we are just getting everything, the hardware, and this hardware is not tested. We do not know if it has spyware, we do not know if it has backdoors, because we simply do not have a national cyber security policy. The first one was written in 2013, which was very generic in nature, and we were promised that in 2020 a second one will come. It has not come. So all the ministries, whether it is defense, power, or electronics, information, home, they all have their own small cyber things. So nobody knows who's testing what, because there are no standards set. There are no labs which have been identified. The procedures are not there for hardware at all. So you see, it's not a question of China. The hardware, the supply chains are the biggest vulnerability. It can come from anywhere, and Chinese, as we know, are there in all the important supply chains of the world today. And mind you, let us not unnecessarily keep bashing the Chinese. I mean, even the Russians have done attacks, cyber attacks. Cyber attacks can come from anywhere. You see? Now, so we have a vulnerability there. We have a vulnerability in software. And now we have a vulnerability in the infoware, which is your data. We simply do not have a consolidated data policy in the country. So data is scattered all over. So it is scattered all over. It cannot be analyzed. I mean, what do you do with the data if you can't do data analytics? So the point I am making is that these are all vulnerabilities. Now, insofar as the armed forces are concerned, there are huge vulnerabilities there also, because digitization is happening at a very rapid speed. See the Air Force, the vulnerabilities are there because of electronics, because of the infiltration of cyber in the physical space. They can go your keyboards, your mouses, your routers. Then as far as the aircrafts are concerned, their cockpit controls, their flight controls, the ATCs then at the airport, so many things have come from China. I mean, our telecommunication, power, all the strategic areas have Chinese where, and we don't know. In fact, we don't know about any country, because why Chinese came? Because they were the lowest bidders and we accepted them. So today, if you do not have the testing, you do not have that situation, you do not have an overarching umbrella organization, how do you get to know all these things? So this is a vulnerability. Then as far as the Air Force is concerned, the infiltration can happen by way of signals. Their IR devices, sensors, RF devices, modems, telephone lines, everything is vulnerable. Your kill chains are vulnerable. They are all vulnerable. Smart weapons are vulnerable. Everything, because anything that is electronic, they can use cyber, and they can, because our supply lines, I mean our industrial complex, we have collected stuff from all over. So the point I am making is, and insofar as access is concerned, I spoke of three things. I said the payload will depend on the battle damage assessment, the vulnerabilities. I have explained vulnerability all over. And then the access can be through Wi-Fi, through internet, through chip swaps, or you can do these pen drives, supply chains. These are all access points we have. The point I am making is that if India has to move forward, it has to take now two big steps. Step number one is, as far as General Rawat is concerned and India is concerned, we need the cyber command today. Nothing will happen without offensive capabilities. Your defensive capabilities cannot do anything. It has to be made today, and his whole talk of theaterization, that can all wait. In any case, as far as I am concerned, it is of no use in the war that we are talking about. And the other thing is that we need a national cyber security policy which can take care of the hardware, software, infoware that I have spoken of, our vulnerabilities in these areas. Thank you so much.